Today is April 1st, 2015. Can we have roll call, please?
Calling the roll, Mr. Germana.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Here. Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent at the moment. Mr. Greenspan. Here. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Council President Brady is in attendance.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody here for public comment related to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we have the minutes of the March 18th meeting, and Germana, Miller, and Greenspan were in attendance. You want to make a motion to approve?
I will move that we approve the minutes from March 18th.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, first item.
Resolution number 2015-0061, a resolution authorizing a loan application to Ohio Environmental Protection Agency Water Pollution Control Loan Fund in the amount of $1,875,000 for a new sanitary sewer structure located in Olmsted Township, authorizing the Director of Public Works on behalf of the County Executive to execute and submit said loan application, authorizing the County Executive to accept said loan if approved, and to execute the agreement and all other documents in connection with said loan, authorizing the Director of Public Works to administer said project, and declaring the necessity of this resolution become immediately effective.
Good morning, Stan Kozaleski, Public Works. What we're submitting before you is part of the funding package for this project. Part of the overall project is about $5.5 million to place sanitary sewers, water line, and rebuild the pavements on the sections of Barton Road, Cook Road, and Bronson Road. This $1.875 million loan with the Water Department Water Pollution Control Loan Fund will be paid back with tap-in fees and funds that we collect for sewer repairs. The balance of the project will be funded. We received $2 million last year for Issue 1, Ohio Public Works funding. We have about $300,000 of county road funds for the sections of Cook and Barton Road that are county roads. And the rest, the balance of about $2 million will be paid for with sanitary and water line fees. So that is our funding structure. Where we are with the status of the plans, they are in for some approval through the Ohio EPA, because anytime you submit plans that you're installing new sewers, they have to get what's called a permit to install. Those plans are down there. We resolved an issue with the railroad. We have to get a permit because we're going to be boring the water line under the railroad. Those things should be resolved hopefully within the next month, and this project will hopefully be out to sale probably in June or July. Number of homes that would be impacted on this, I can give you a little bit of information on that if you'd like. There'll be 12 residents on Barton Road. There's 40 residents on Bronson Road, about 38 residents on Cook Road. Basically, this is an area that's basically served by septic systems. Working with the Board of Health and the Township trustees, they're in a state of failure. Most of these were in the 50s and 60s. So we've been working with the trustees. Either they would have to replace their septic systems or put the sewers in. Problems if they replace their septic systems, once the sewers come in, they would have to tie into the septic system. So we're trying to coordinate that with anything in a township so that they don't have to, pay twice. This also will allow access to the JED that is that was established sometime in the 2000s, as we will have some access off of Cook Road and Barton Road, where they'll be able to have tie-ins for the future development of the JED. So this project will take care of that.
The JED stands for?
It's a Joint Economic Development District. Sometime in the 2000s, Olmsted Falls and the township trustees identified an area that they were going to try to help promote development in there. And then it becomes a way to help entice businesses to come in there. But they need obviously the sewers and the water lines to help develop that. So this project has been in the works for a few years to try to get this. So the sewers and the water line will be built to handle that proposed development too. So that's a general overview. I can answer any other questions you may have.
Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair,
Greenspan.
just a question, having once represented the township and
Yes.
understanding this issue years ago when sewer was put in and the complaints we heard from residents who were required by law to tie in and the expense. And remember, we
Yes.
went through offering loan programs.
Yes.
The Board of Health was involved, and some folks didn't tie in, and there were issues. These residents you're talking about, do they know what's going on? Have they been communicated? Do they understand the financial implication of this transaction?
Yes, probably about a year or so ago, I don't remember the details. We had a public meeting out there to go over the project details, explain to residents what the process was when the project was coming in. We're about 6 months behind on that process because of some of the delays in getting the EPA loan. But also now the residents in the past, when you first served there, you helped us get that mortgage program in place. Obviously, that's available to everybody now. So what we've done, because of the delay, we've extended that deadline to make sure that anybody that wants to tap in there now, we're trying to give them as much time as we can. So I think they have till sometime next month or so to get the paperwork started so that they can put it on the mortgage program for 10 years.
And just so the committee's aware, if you own a home and you do not tie in, the Board of Health can condemn your property.
Correct. Yeah, if your septic system's failing. If it's not failing, I don't know. I'm not quite sure if you still have to tie in. I think if the sewers are in front of your property, whether it's failing or not, they will mandate you to tie in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let the record reflect that Councilwoman Simon's here. Good morning. Question, this has not been bid out yet,
No.
correct? So,
You will probably see the formal bids come in probably sometime in June or July, and then once those bids come in, like the next item, we'll be presenting those bids to you for acceptance. So that will be happening in the next few months. We haven't started that process yet because we're still waiting for the EPA to give us our permit to install.
so the next question kind of reflects what happened with the next piece of legislation. What if the bids come in 10% over what we're getting the loans for? What happens then?
We would have to relook at our financing and see how we would be able to fund the project. We would either go back to the trustees, go back to any of the loan sources, adjust that. We would have to look. We like to build about a 10 to 15% contingency into our projects. On a project like this, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. We've had other projects done out there where there's some sewer work. This should be high enough up. There is some rock out there, but this project should not be into that detail. When we did Fitch Road about 10 years ago, it was a very deep sewer coming off of Bagley. I mean, that little stretch of sewer was over $1 million. Maybe it was about 3/4 of a mile because it was so deep and into the rock. This is up higher and in an area, so we shouldn't have those issues. But if those in any project, if those do come in, our staff is pretty good at estimating our projects, but we would have to reevaluate and figure out how we move forward. We don't want to lose any of the grants or loans that we have in place ready to do this. We would work with the different funding sources to try to figure out where we missed on our estimates, figure out what the problem was. Maybe we had a bust in our numbers. We'd look at those things and then evaluate it and then figure out how to proceed.
Okay, is this time sensitive in any way?
Yes, it would, bless you. If we could get this passed, because we do want to get this process, just so that the EPA will not hold up our permit to install, which gives us the authority to bid the project, so they might be waiting on this piece of, this document to be signed so that they could give us the permit to install to start the bidding process. So if we could get it approved on second reading, we appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions? Anyone have an objection to moving this forward, second reading suspension? If not, I move that we
Do you want the next one?
move this forward, second reading suspension to the full council. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
This is approved second reading suspension to the full council. Next item.
Resolution number 2015-0062, a resolution making an award on requisition number 32769 to Perk Company Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $1,427,000 $823.07 for rehabilitation and resurfacing of various bridge decks in various municipalities, authorizing the county executive to execute the contract and all other documents consistent with said award in this resolution, authorizing the county engineer on behalf of the county executive to make an application for allocation from county motor vehicle $7.50 license tax fund in said amount to fund said contract, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you. Good morning. Jamal Hassani with Public Works. This is a project, just like you were talking about the bids. We had one bid. This is for deck sealing of 4 bridges, and the bid actually was 9.8% higher than the engineer estimate. I think the engineer estimate was kind of low on this project, but also from speaking with some contractors, a lot of them are very busy. They didn't even take out plans for this project, so we only had the one bid. I know last project also with the culvert, we also had one bid, but that one was specialized work. This one is mainly just deck sealing and resurfacing. We should have had more. I think the fact that they're busy, that's probably the only reason.
And we don't send out proposals. We wait for people just to see the legal advertisement.
And on our website, yeah. Yeah, we don't send out invitations, no.
I'm just wondering about, I question, you have only one bidder, and it's almost 10% over. So I'm gonna ask the question, well, why wouldn't we go out to bid again? Reject this because it's over the estimate.
This project, actually, the project, the way we programmed it, we programmed up to 1.4 million. So it's still within what we programmed for the project. It's not that we don't have the money. The engineer estimate was 1.3, and the bid came in at 1.427. So it's still within our budget. Going back out would probably delay us another 3 months, which, the construction season is very small in this area. So that would push it probably to the next construction season. That's why, and I don't know if we will get better bids. I know on another project, the Stearns Grade Separation, I called one of the contractors and asked him how come and that was a big project, Great Lakes, how come they didn't bid on that job? And he just said, we're really busy. They couldn't take on more work. I mean, that's good for the economy, but it's not good for us because eventually we're gonna see higher bids on a lot of our jobs. But it does go into a cycle.
I got it.
Yeah.
I just gotta ask the question.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
it's staring me right in the face,
Yeah.
10% more one bid.
Yep.
So, but I understand.
Yeah.
I understand busy.
If I could add something
Go ahead,
also
Stan.
to your question. Every year we go out to the Ohio Contractors Association, has an annual meeting in February. And at that time, we give them a listing of all of our projects for the next year to try to get them, hey, this is the targets for the projects that were coming in. It has rough estimates, bid dates and stuff like that. So we do try to market our projects out there. They're also listed at our websites, and I know contractors regularly check and stuff, and they do talk to some of our staff. So we do try to go out there, but a lot of those folks are also registered with our Office of Procurement Diversity. They're regularly checking this stuff too. This is a very specialized project. This is like a major maintenance project for us. When you're looking at the deck, we're trying to extend the wearing surface of the deck so it doesn't have water going through it, so it doesn't impact the rest of the project. So it's a specialized type of project also, which might be why we didn't get many bids also. I just wanted to add that to your question from before.
Well, do we have a list of contractors that are qualified previous contractors that are qualified to do this kind of work?
Probably any bridge contractor that's pre-qualified with ODOT to do it could bid on it. Some specialize in it, some don't. As Jamal said, some get busy. It just depends on the other projects that are out there and when you put them out to bid. You know, we bid this relatively early in the season, you know.
The one good thing we're seeing actually with this is now the SPE contractors are becoming the prime. That last two, this one and the one before, they're both SPE contractors that are the prime on these jobs. So I mean, it's working that the big contractors are using these SPEs to the point where the SPEs now can take on these big jobs too.
Okay, any questions from members of the committee? Is this time sensitive?
Again, with the construction season, yes, if you could please, just to get them started as soon as we can.
Okay. Does anybody have an objection of moving this second reading suspension? Okay, I'll move that we move this to the full council second reading suspension. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
It's approved. And I'm just going to say something, because it occurred to me, and I wasn't going to say it, but the more I think about it, I think it needs to be said. I know in at least a couple major incidences where people that wanted the bid, the people that were doing the bid were on a leave of absence. It slipped through the cracks. I'm just wondering if we could, and especially since this is over and this is the only bid, you know, if on contracts, if we have known people that are qualified, just sending a notice. I'm just wondering, thinking out loud, but one time in particular, which was a major thing in Parma, is we normally had Chevrolets from Brooklyn Chevrolet, and the guy that was in charge, actually, I can't remember if it was a guy or a gal, but he was out, and Brooklyn Chevrolet was the authorized to bid on police cars. They never bid, and we ended up with Fords, and it was like this big brouhaha. We got a Chevy plant in the city, and now we're buying Fords that were in Brook Park. But had the owner of that company known that the bid was there and the person was, you know, we wouldn't have bought Fords. Probably would have had Chevys. So I'm going to just think about that a while, and if you have any thoughts, you know, let me know what you think about possibly doing that, because I don't think it would cost the county much money to do that on these contracts, to make sure that we get robust bidders, and we want to make sure that it just wasn't overlooked.
Mr. Chair, I just have a comment. I don't know how we can pick and choose, though, who we're going to notify. That might be a negative consequence. I mean, I don't know if we could just select a couple that we know about, and somebody else is going to come in and say, why didn't I get notice? And that creates a whole nother can of worms.
Lenore, you got a comment on this?
Lenore Lockett, Office of Procurement and Diversity. Just as Councilwoman Simon stated, a long time ago when I was at the engineer's office, we had a pre-qualification list. Not really a pre-qualification, it was a list where we would notify them about upcoming opportunities, and it was no pre-qualification. If you wanted to be on the list, we would add you to the list. At that time, we would mail out the RFQs. Then the vendors became dependent upon receiving the mailing, not necessarily the legal ad. And if it was late in the mail, things of that sort, or if it was a new engineering company to the area who didn't receive the list, then they felt that the list was more preferential to the people on the list. The other, we are looking at ways to try to spread the word. We did a vendors training in the fall We can do another vendors training so they know where to go to find our advertisements. To also know that, for instance, as Stan mentioned, Public Works has a capital improvement plan where they show what they're planning to do over the next couple of years. But a way to do it where it's not within the advertisement period, so no bidder will have the preference that, oh, I received a call, so they want me to make a bid, or because a person may make a bid, we're just saying, we're sending out the information about this opportunity, but we haven't checked to make sure you're not on the debarment list. We haven't checked to make sure you meet the ODOT pre-qualification list. So we don't want there to be a view by the vendors that because they received the call from the county or a notification from the county that they have a leg up on the bid opportunity. So there's always that thin line between being open and encouraging input, but at the same time trying to be fair and level and each vendor knowing that when you submit, you still have to meet the requirements. We still have to find that you met the administrative requirements, the SB requirements, and the technical requirements.
I got it. And just for the record, there's been several projects, a number of projects in my district done with this PERC company, and very few complaints. They're an excellent contractor. I'm just saying, one bid, overestimate, just thinking outside the box. So we'll consider what you told me. Thank you. Any questions for Lenore? Okay, thank you, Lenore.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Miller.
I would just suggest that that if we just get in close touch with our bidders and get a sense of, see it from their perspective, how do bidders go about finding out what's open and what are their usual sources of information, and if we really understand it from their perspective how they're operating, maybe we can find some ways to better get the information out there in ways that they're going to access and use. So I think we should continuously try to do that.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item is
Ordinance number 2015-0006, an ordinance enacting the Board of Control Consolidation Act and declaring the necessity that this ordinance become immediately effective.
okay. Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The idea here is that that we consolidate the Board of Control and Contracts and Purchasing Board into a single Board of Control. My thinking initially was it's just more efficient. We have these meetings every single Monday morning, and different people are required to come to them, and there's a separation depending on the calendar of some amount of time, 15, 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour, depending on when the first meeting ends and the second meeting begins. It's not too much of a burden for council members, but it is every week. And the people from the executive, from the administration side, and the executive himself is involved in this, so it's valuable time. I was not asked to introduce this by the administration, but I think it probably is more in their interest than ours. But I'm glad there are people on this panel who have spent time on both or one or both of these boards over the last 4 years. It gives me some confidence about the feedback, that I'm getting. And so this would simply consolidate the two boards, and how it would be structured and who would sit on them is laid out in the legislation. I know our attorney, Mike White, is Mike White. I always say that, it's just stuck in my mind that way. It is too many years, Mike King.
Mike King.
I guess I'm still screwing up, huh? If you've got any questions, I think he's best prepared to answer them. But I've been talking to people about this, but I'm particularly interested in members who have sat on the board over a period of time and if they have any concerns over the legislation.
Mr. Miller?
I'm going to start by saying that I'm fine with the legislation, and I believe there are advantages. I'd just like to talk a little bit about the history of this. We started out by developing just the Board of Control with a $50,000 starting limit, and then it became 100,000. And then the original thought was on these contracts of 100,000, while the administration could do those on their own. But the administration said, well, we want to be open and transparent. It would be beneficial to have a review process, even for these smaller contracts. And so we then set up the Contracts and Purchasing Board. And I would regularly attend the meetings, and it was over in the temporary quarters, and the acoustics weren't good, and I was sitting in the back, and half the time I couldn't hear, and so I started thinking, well, the council ought to have one representative seated at the table, even at the other board, and so at the appropriate time I offered that amendment, and it was approved, and so the council had representation on both boards, and so the combining of the two boards, I think it first is going to offer some time savings, and also sometimes there's question of, well, does it go to the Board of Control, or does it go to the Contracts and Purchasing Board? And sometimes you have to send the contract to one board and the exemption to the other board, and so it's going to simplify matters. So I think it has that advantage. I think there was some value to separating out the larger contracts from the smaller contracts, and so you're going to lose that in the combination. But I don't think that by any means outweighs the advantages, and I think the only thing is that we maintain our commitment to the openness and the transparency, and not start saying that because we now just have one board, that we're going to raise the lower limit to 25,000 or 50,000. I think there is value to take a look at some of these smaller contracts, some of which have programmatic and policy implications, and have them discussed in the public session in what now will be the single Board of Control. The final thing that I would say is that as I recall, the $500 lower limit came about because of some provision in state law where it says that for any contract over $500,000, there has to be a release form signed relating to whether the contractor made campaign contributions, and I don't know whether that process has been resolved or not, but there's been I know that Public Works has suggested that there could be some definite time and process savings if we were to raise the lower limit to perhaps 1,000 or 1,500, and I don't know whether we consider that as part of this legislation or another time, but a modest increase in the lower limit of that nature, I would be perfectly fine with that. So those are my comments.
Okay, Mr. Greenspan?
Well, just a procedural issue. Is this an item, I guess I look to the author, are we ready to move this out? Or do you want to have additional hearings? What's your?
Well,
your
I
thoughts?
don't, unless somebody throws up a red flag, I introduced this right at the beginning of the year. And so unless particularly people who I'm sure have the experience over the last 4 years to make a judgment on this, help me make a judgment on it. It just seemed to be a common sense efficiency issue to me, now that I've been sitting on the board, for 3 months myself. I have a keener sense of it. But I have no reason to not move it forward unless there's, like I say, a red flag that somebody wants to throw up about what we're doing. But I'm not in a hurry. I just don't see any resistance to what we're trying to do.
Okay, well, if there is no resistance, I mean, I'll make a motion to move resolution, get the resolution number. Sorry, the ordinance 2015-0006 out of committee for consideration by council.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, there's a proposed substitute.
Do we have that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe it starts on page 27.
While we're getting ready to hear what the proposed substitute is, because this is drawn up by the law department, Councilman Miller alluded, Mr. Chairman, Councilman Miller alluded to the amounts and whether we wanted to discuss, changing amounts. I'm not doing that because I don't feel as confident about that or do I feel that I'm have any sense of whether there's consensus about changing the amounts, because I know different people have different points of view about that. So that's definitely, not included in this legislation, and I would rather not see it amended to include new limits.
Okay, so can we have someone explain the substitute and the reasons behind it? And since there wasn't a second to your motion,
That's fine. I'll withdraw the motion.
We'll go with the substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael King, council staff. The proposed substitute is purely technical in nature. It makes various technical changes to correct a few errors in the original draft. For instance, in getting rid of the contracts and purchasing board, it also got rid of the time-sensitive mission-critical approvals, which needed to be shifted over to the Board of Control. So that's being added in the proposed substitute. And it's also intended to fix a few cross-references that got jumbled up when the original ordinance, which was before we created the county code, was codified. So it's really intended to just address those sort of lingering issues that have been in the code. But there are no other substantive changes in terms of the intent of the legislation to combine the two boards.
Okay. Any comment as to the minimum limit change?
Certainly. I know, and I can get a more specific answer for Councilman Miller's concern. I believe the Ohio Revised Code provision says that there is either some type of reporting requirement or limitation on public officials from awarding contracts over $500 to contractors that have given campaign contributions to that public official. The reason, but it exempts approvals that are applied to boards such as this, approval authorities such as this. So for instance, if we were to raise the $500 minimum threshold for the Board of Control to say $10,000, for instance, then any contract awarded between $500 and $10,000, the county would have an obligation to ask the contractor, so we'd be adding a layer of red tape, to say, did you give a campaign contribution to the executive in the past? And I think the purpose of keeping it at the $500 level is it basically eliminated that additional step that would need to be taken only for contracts in that particular window. Now, obviously, council can sort of determine whether or not that additional bureaucratic cost outweighs the benefits of raising the dollar threshold, but that I think was the original reason why the dollar threshold was at that $500 level.
Mr. Chairman?
To me. Mr. Miller?
One of the advantages of this legislation is that it's very simple and it consolidates the boards and it doesn't have anything that's extraneous. And I raised that issue because Public Works brought it up as a possible consideration, and I think we should put it on our radar screen. But I'm more than fine with passing this legislation as is and get this done and get this new system up and running, and we can take a look at that other question down the road. That's fine with me.
Mr. President?
And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the councilman's comments, and I'm certainly open to that discussion. I just know that that's a discussion where I already have some sense that there are different opinions on the council about it, so it's a longer discussion. And if any member or the administration wants to introduce legislation to have that discussion, I'm quite willing to entertain it, but that's not what I had in mind. I was just trying to do something fairly simple.
Stan?
Yes, if I could just, I'd like to thank the councilman for bringing this up. Sometimes with Public Works, we have specialized equipment. Sometimes the requirements to get stuff gets expensive. It's something that he brought up to our attention, and would be more than willing to get a lot more of our fiscal folks involved with that purchasing process to get into the explanation a little bit more, to ease any concerns, and if it works, it's fine. It's just something that would make it a little bit easier to process. We're not trying to circumvent anything. It just, prices have gone up since some of these things have happened, and the nature of some of our equipment is expensive, and parts and stuff get expensive. But I think if there's anything we can do to answer any questions down the line, if it's further considered, we'd definitely like to be part of that discussion. Thank you for considering it. Thank you.
Okay. It just seems to me that 500 is such a low.
It is a low
It
amount.
is such a low
I admit.
amount that, but with the
It's not what I was
implications,
looking at,
yeah, with the implications of political contributions and so on and so forth, I think it's almost cleaner just to keep it at 500 so that there is no suspicion of why we're raising it. Mr. Greenspan, did you have anything else?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, who's the author of the sponsor? Oh, I'm sorry, who's the author of the proposed substitute?
It's a combination of. The proposed substitute cleans up the references and, how the merge is going to happen. It has nothing to do with the limits. The limits are staying the same.
The reason I ask is I would expect that the sponsor of the substitute be listed in the title of the legislation. It has the council president as being the sponsor, but I'm not sure the council president sponsored the substitute.
Like I said, it's just a cleanup of.
No, I know,
technical-
but somebody else if I'm reading this and not knowing the council president did not sponsor this, I would assume the council president or the sponsor had no issues with the amendment, or I'm sorry, with the substitute.
Oh, Mike, you want to address that?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Reed?
Just respond. I understand the issue that the councilman's raising. It's a broader kind of an issue. I don't think it's so much, it goes to this particular substitute, but I think it's worth mentioning. It's really kind of a broader discussion about the role the law department plays in substituting legislation and who's initiating that. The last law director, very, very skillful individual, was clearly a frustrated public official, would-be public official as well, and was often, I think, pushed the envelope quite a bit, trying to influence public policy, and I understand that instinct. But there is a point at which, what is the role of the law department, to advocate for public policy decisions? I don't think so. To help us with our work and make sure that we've got our T's crossed and et cetera, yes, of course. So I think that in this case, no harm, no foul, so to speak, but it is something I'm interested in keeping an eye on in the future in terms of what I remember over the last 4 years of the very talented law director continuing to jump into the middle of a meeting and espouse a point of view beyond, I think, what was just counseling the council.
And just one clarification to past practice and how proposed substitutes have been introduced for Councilman Greenspan. Traditionally, no matter who introduces the proposed substitute, whether it were you or Councilman Miller or anybody else on council, the sponsor of the proposed substitute is usually not listed on the agenda unless there's more than one to clarify who's sponsoring which. It's usually still the primary sponsor on the legislation. We could work with our clerk's office to sort of help clarify that so that when proposed substitutes are introduced, that they do reflect not only the primary sponsor of the original legislation, but also the sponsor of the proposed substitute, if that's to council's.
Yeah, I just think that's fine. I mean, the reason I'm asking this question is because any one of us could introduce legislation of the executive, and then there'd be a proposed substitute that comes in that has the original sponsor's name attached to it, but they may be opposed to this proposed substitute, and nowhere on here. And then, of course, if they raise opposition, it looks like they're raising opposition to their own legislation. So,
That's a good point.
I think if you're looking at it procedurally, I think if I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the council president as being the sponsor of the proposed substitute, and I'm not necessarily hearing that.
And I think, I'm sorry, just to clarify, I think that the law department worked with council staff to introduce the substitute, and I don't think it was a isolated effort by the law department in this particular case. I understand your point, but this is not that type of situation.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, Councilman Brady's right. It's a broader question. I don't think anybody objects to this substitute amendment per se, but my experience is when there are substitutes to legislation I've sponsored, I discuss it with the law department, and if I agree to it, then it's there, but that's been the practice as we discuss it, and if it's okay, it goes forward. But there was some strange configurations with Councilman Greenspan and me, I think, that came up that he sponsored something and I had a substitute, it ended up both of our names on it. So I know what you're talking about. I forget what the issue was, but do you remember?
You opened yourself wide open for that one. I'm not stepping through that.
Strange bedfellow legislation going on with
I
substitutes.
wonder how that could happen. Just a little bit more information for me, just to understand, because, I'll admit I have never been to either one of these meetings. How different was the makeup of the board from the contract and purchasing board to the board of control? Was it the same? Was it the same people basically?
The primary difference, and I don't have the specific difference in makeup, but the primary difference between the two boards is that there are 3 council members who sit on. I think there are 4 members, including the executive of the executive staff on the board of control, 3 members of council. And I can't remember the exact number of members of the contracts and purchasing board, but there's only 1 member of council.
They were the same number of members.
It's the same number of members.
Yeah.
So 7 members on each board. Board of Control has 3 members of council. Contracts and Purchasing has 1 member of council. This new board would maintain the same membership of the existing Board of Control.
Okay, so the 4 members that were from the administration
I believe it's
were the same on both boards.
I think the Board of Control, it's the executive, the fiscal officer, the Director of Public Works, and the Director of the Director of the Office of Procurement and Diversity. And I believe that the Contracts and Purchasing Board had 2 additional members of the administrative staff. I want to say it's the Chief of Staff and Anka.
That's it, the chief of
Oh,
staff.
just the Chief of Staff.
Yeah.
So,
There were 6 members in Contracting and Purchasing Board and 7 members in Board of Control. So there were 4 members of the Executive Office in Board of Control and 3 members of council. And in the Contracting and Purchasing Board, there were 5 members of the county executive, and then 1 member of council. So that's how the membership. So basically, council is gaining 2 seats at the table for approval
Okay.
of contracts.
Does the administration have anybody that wants to speak to this? Are we assuming that you're in full concurrence of the substitute?
Carlton Laster, Department of Regional Collaboration. At this moment, I can't speak to that. I would assume that there wasn't any objection when I spoken with Mike King on this matter. Mr. Kraus, who's my colleague and the director, is fully aware of this matter as well, and we are of the notion that that we are on board with this. We are just waiting to follow the council's lead on this matter.
Mr. Chairman, just a little clarification, I wouldn't normally do this, I think I'll do it carefully. I have discussed this on a couple of occasions with the county executive, and there is no objection to what we're proposing.
Okay. I just think we ought to hear it officially. I think this is a great piece of legislation because if it's going to save time, it's basically the same people. We have full impact of council oversight in looking, because a lot of times things are referred from these boards right to council. So I feel comfortable. I think this is a major improvement. I think we should probably adopt the substitute and put it at second reading, just to see if there's any member of the public that's got any questions on this, and then pass it on third reading. So can we have a motion to accept the substitute?
I'm so moved.
Is there a second?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Council President Brady isn't a member.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Councilwoman Simon moves.
I'll second.
It's seconded by Mr. Greenspan. Any further discussion? Okay, so all those in favor of accepting the substitute as the document to go forward, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. So I'll entertain a motion for second reading.
I so move.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for second reading on 0006. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Miller.
I guess this can now be just miscellaneous business, but since it was brought up, I would just like to make a comment about the sponsorship of substitutes. And my opinion is that from a procedural standpoint, that a substitute should just be looked at as another form of an amendment. It's rather than just proposing the specific changes. It's an amendment in the form of suggesting what the whole thing, once amended, should look like, and so, as such, the substitute should have a sponsor like any other amendment, and but that should not affect the sponsorship of the main piece of legislation. If the substitute is approved, then that would not in itself change the sponsorship of the main legislation. But if anyone was a sponsor of the main legislation and they said, well, now that it's been amended, I don't support it as amended, well, then it would be, then they would have the opportunity to tell the clerk I would like to have my name taken off because I don't support it in the form that it's in. And so that's how I would handle that.
I agree somewhat, but I think sometimes a tweaking to a piece of legislation, the tweak might have major impact. So I think the council person that's offering the substitute could ask to be added as a sponsor, at the time that this is going forward, and that would solve the problem. If they feel strongly about it, please add me as a sponsor. That solves it. So, okay, great. Good conversation. Anybody here for any other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed
Anything
in.
else that we need to discuss? Okay, so this meeting is adjourned as all business is done.